Hi, welcome back to Sugar, Spice and Rosé. Erica here. Today I'll be showing you how to do a marbled cake. I'm going to show you how to make a Swiss meringue buttercream, how to stack your cakes, how to crumb coat the cake, how to final coat that cake, how to slice the cake, and I'm going to be showing you 2 cake making methods. So I hope you're looking forward to that. And I'm going to be giving you a little sneak peek into how a fail turned into something beautiful. So if you're interested in seeing how I do this, please keep on watching. So the first method that I'm going to show you is the creaming method. And that is where you cream your butter and your sugar together until it gets nice and pale and fluffy that you just saw. Then you add your eggs, 1 to 2 at a time, allowing the eggs to mix together for approximately 30 seconds after each addition. And then you're going to add your flour. So you're going to add your flour and your liquid, which in this case is the milk, alternately, starting with your flour and ending with flour. You're going to add the flour in 4 additions, and the milk in 3 additions. With this method, it really is easy to overmix your batter because the flour is coming into direct contact with the liquid, for example the eggs and the milk, and it's starting to form gluten at a very early stage, especially when it's coming on to the end process of the mixing. That's why you see me folding this last batch of flour in, because I want to reduce the risk of overmixing. And then I just mix it for about another 20 seconds on the mixer, and then I'm finished. I don't want to overmix this batter, so I just make sure to scrape the bowl down to make sure all of my ingredients are incorporated evenly, and then I pour the mixture into a greased and lined baking pan. In this case, I'm using a baking sheet because, as you're going to see very soon, the way I want this cake to look is more like a rectangular, square-ish shape. So I'm using a baking sheet. Moving on to the reverse creaming method now. I'm going to start by blooming my chocolate in my hot water. And this portion right here, when I add the eggs and the oil, is going to be the liquid part of this recipe or of this method. And the reverse creaming method is really what it sounds like. You're going to add the butter into the flour, reverse creaming it or rubbing that butter into the fat, and then you're going to add some of that liquid that you would have just made, which is the hot water and cocoa and the eggs and oil, into that butter and flour. Then you're going to mix that for approximately 30 seconds to a full minute, because with this method it's very hard to activate the gluten because the flour is being coated in that fat. So you have to create an emulsion, or you have to almost overwork the batter to start to form that gluten. So then I added the remaining amount of my hot water and egg mixture and pour that into the mixer and mix it for another minute on high, because you have to make sure you activate the gluten in this particular method, or mix it just enough, because if you don't, your cake will come out nice and moist, but it will be crumbly because it doesn't have the proper structure. So the difference between the 2 cake making methods is the way you mix the batter, and you have to be very careful where it comes to the reverse creaming method that you mix it just enough. But where it comes to the regular creaming method, you have to ensure you do not over mix it. So as you can see, the way they both are made are similar in some ways, where you pour in that liquid, but at the same time the beginning stages of the recipe is completely different, which is going to yield completely different results. For example, this chocolate cake is very light and fluffy and airy, whilst compared to the creaming method, it still has a little fluff, but it's a little bit more dense, and I really love the reverse creaming method where it comes to my chocolate cake, because when I first started to use this recipe, it didn't really taste good in the creaming method, but in the reverse creaming method, I feel as though I nailed it. Moving on to our vanilla Swiss meringue buttercream, I'm separating 6 egg whites from the egg yolks because a Swiss meringue buttercream is where you create a Swiss meringue, which is heating or melting the sugar into the egg whites over a bain-marie and whipping it into a meringue and adding your butter. So I'm going to show you that full process. I'm going to take you through step by step. So separate your eggs, add your sugar to a heat-proof bowl, pour in your egg whites and place that over a bain-marie. And a bain-marie is just a pot filled with approximately 2 inches of water. Make sure it's not touching the bowl. Of simmering water. You're going to place that on the stove and you're going to gently mix the egg whites and the sugar like you see me doing right here, making sure to scrape down the sides of the bowl because you do not want that sugar to crystallize and mess up your whole mixture that you have doing here. So over a low heat, the water should be simmering, stirring it constantly, scraping on the side of the bowl, scraping the spatula to get all of that sugar, and you're going to melt that sugar into the egg whites. And as you can see, it has a very little foam, but the egg white mixture is now a bit clearer than before. And when you dip your finger in it, you're going to realize that it's going to be hot, so be very careful. But rub some of that egg white and sugar mixture between your fingers to make sure you don't feel any sugar granules, and that's when you know it's ready. When it's hot and you no longer feel any sugar granules, that mixture is nice and smooth. Now you're going to add this to your stand mixer bowl. You can use this with a hand mixer, but it's going to take a bit longer. But add it to your mixer bowl and whip it on high until you see it gets this nice and white meringue color. And then, as you would have seen at first, when I started whipping it, it would have been way too soft. That would have been way too soft. So you're going to whip it until it reaches a stiff peak. When that bowl is cool to the touch, or as cool as possible, when you get that stiff peak, you're going to add your cold butter. For me, someone who lives in a cold climate, in a hot climate, I should say, sorry, I like to use cold butter because it causes the meringue to whip a lot easier and a lot better. It almost takes it to the perfect stage when that butter is cold. But let's say, for example, your butter isn't cold enough and your buttercream, in a sense, looks as though it's turned to soup. What you're going to do is add that buttercream to the fridge for approximately 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then you're going to take it out. And as you can see, when I added that vanilla, it almost looks split, and that's completely normal. But you're allowing that butter to solidify a little bit, so now you have to re-whip it, you know. So as you re-whip it, you can see it's starting to get a lot smoother, it's getting a lot airier, and it's a completely different consistency to what you would have had previously compared to the soup that you would have had. So when your butter isn't cold enough, your meringue will turn to that soupy consistency, and there's nothing wrong with that, okay? You're not a failure. That is completely normal. But if you live in a hot country like I do, I like to use the cold butter because adding that cold butter to the meringue, yes, it may take a bit longer for it to incorporate, but it takes me to this smooth and whipped stage a lot faster. But again, if it turns to soup, you just have to place it in the fridge, allow it to set again, and just re-whip it. And halfway through this mixing process, I switched out the whisk attachment for the paddle attachment. Whipped it for another, I would say, maybe 5 minutes. This whole process took approximately 14 minutes since it would have come out of the fridge. So you're going to switch out that whisk attachment for the paddle attachment, whip it on high for 5 minutes, and when those 5 minutes are up, you're going to use the same paddle attachment and whip it on low to release some of those air pockets and air bubbles, which is going to give you a smoother buttercream when you go to use it for your final coat. And then we're going to move on to our cake. After your cakes would have been chilling in the plastic wrap in the fridge, I cut it in half, and then I cut it in half horizontally and vertically because, like I said, I want a rectangular-ish shaped cake. So again, I'm repeating that with the chocolate cake. Cut it in half horizontally and in half vertically, I sped up this process because I didn't want to like keep you guys here sitting forever watching me cut cake. And then with each of those slices, I placed a piece of parchment, a piece of plaster wrap between each layer, or you could have used parchment. Now we're moving on to look, there's me. Now we're moving on to assembling the cake. You're going to take your turntable with a non-slip mat and your board. Place some of that buttercream on your cake board of choice. Add just a little bit to help that first layer of cake stick. And then you're going to add a small dollop of buttercream to start on this first layer. You don't want too much buttercream between layers because this is a fairly thin cake, as you can see, and you're going to have multiple layers. So you want it to, I personally like more cake to buttercream, so you can adjust that to your personal liking. And a tip that I would have gotten from Yolanda Gap from How to Cake It is place a little bit of buttercream on the corners or the points of your square or rectangular cake to stop them from drooping downwards. Then you're going to add your chocolate cake layer, and you're going to alternate between the vanilla and chocolate layer and fill this layer the same way and repeat it for all of your layers. Now when you've stacked 4 layers of cake, we're going to add a few bubble tea straws and the cake board for our support, because this is an 8-layer cake and it is going to be tall. It's going to need this support. So I took some bubble tea straws, spinning them so that they go into the cake straight down, and I'm using 4 of them, smaller than the shape of the cake and the cake board I'm going to add between. You're going to see how small that cake board is in a second. Add a little bit of buttercream and add a smaller cake board between the layers. That's just personally what I did for this cake. Add a little bit of buttercream on top of that cake board and just continue like normal. Act as if the cutting board, the cake board is not there, and fill it as usual, making sure all the layers are level with my spatula. That's what you see me doing. But repeat that step. Just continue filling the cake like normal. And because again it's a tall cake, I added a small skewer to help keep the cake leveled and not start leaning. Not that it was, but that was just like a safety precaution for myself. Then when you're finished stacking all of the cakes, you're going to crumb coat. And a crumb coat is a very thin layer of buttercream locking in the crumbs, so that when it comes to your final coat of buttercream, it's not speckled with cake crumbs. So this is just an extra step and precaution that cake decorators take. And it's again a very thin layer of buttercream along all the sides of the cake, and it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. Again, you're just trying to lock in those crumbs, and after you've done that, you're going to place it in the fridge to chill until that buttercream is firm and set. And because some of my cake was a bit uneven, I trimmed it a little bit. If you have any questions regarding anything that I'm doing, if I'm going a bit too quickly, please let me know. This cake video at the point of recording is like 20 minutes long, and I didn't want to keep you guys here with like the smallest steps, like showing you know, me crumb coating this cake for a whole 20 minutes without getting through anything. So if I've gone too quickly, please let me know. So after your cake is set, I added some of that buttercream just like you would have done for your crumb coat for your final coat, spreading a little bit more extra buttercream on the outside for your final coat, because you will be scraping away some of it when you try to get it smooth. So don't be afraid to add a lot of buttercream here, you know, not the whole bowl, but like a lot, that when you start scraping, you don't scrape away and start to see the nakedness of the cake. And for this whole crumb coating and final coating process, I started using my offset spatula, and to smooth the cake out, I'm using this really nice and tall buttercream scraper, icing scraper. For the life of me right now, I really cannot remember the professional name of it. A cake scraper. I think it's called a cake scraper. I don't know why I just forgot that. But yeah, using your cake scraper, moving slowly, taking your time, you're going to scrape away some of that buttercream. And where you see any major holes or gaps in your buttercream, just add a little bit more buttercream and just scrape over that until it's nice and smooth. And now moving on to coloring your buttercream, you're going to take some of that Swiss meringue buttercream and melt it in the microwave for about 30 seconds until it turns to liquid, and add some purple, red and pink food coloring a little bit at a time, especially for this color that I'm trying to achieve here, and mix that together. And for your lighter shade, add a little bit of that darker color to some white buttercream and mix that together as well. For the buttercream that would have been melted, just allow that to set in the fridge and then re-whip it until it's nice and fluffy like you would have seen in the clip previously. And I was originally, for the decorating process, I was originally trying to do those petal flowers, those palette knife flowers. But that did not work out. Then I decided I wanted to do just like petals, and it did not work out because Swiss meringue isn't really the best buttercream in my climate. Yes, Swiss meringue buttercream really isn't that good in my hot climate. So the decorating that I wanted to do at first didn't work out. So as you would have seen, I took some splotches of the color and placed it on the cake, and then I just started to swipe with my cake scraper, my buttercream scraper, and the color started to blend really nicely like a marble, and I was like, okay, this is working out now. So after I've done my initial scraping, I just went in between the layers with lighter color, darker color, even white, to make it a little bit more marbled. And again, I just continue to scrape the cake just like that with the cake scraper until I got the look that I wanted. Now for the back of the cake, like I said, this was not my original idea for the cake. So I had ran out of buttercream, of white buttercream, so I had to go in between those empty spaces and added colored bits of buttercream. So that's what you see me doing, and I repeated that whole dotting the color and scraping method throughout the whole cake, as you can see. And after I've taken a look at the cake and I really like the patterns and stuff, I stopped there. And I just wanted to be really transparent once again with you guys to show you how sometimes things don't always work out. That's why practice makes practice, you know. I heard this songs on Instagram that practice doesn't make perfect. It just, you know, it just makes you a lot better at what you're doing. Not perfect, but it really just enhances your skills, and that's something that I would have been lacking. So I'm sharing this journey with you, and I really hope that you'll come along with it and you can learn something from me, that I'm teaching you something. I really hope that. I really want to get to know you and, you know, share this passion of mine with you and see if we're similar anywhere, or if you're completely different, you know, you can still share that with me. So I hope you enjoy this video. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Feel free to do that. I have so many videos that I want to show you, and I hope you stay tuned. And until then, bye.
Pas de soleil, pas de soleil, pas de soleil, pas de soleil, pas de soleil.